Unfortunately, my dad had an accident. He was fell down the basement stairs, had a head injury, and we were in intensive care. And I was looking through the newspapers in Indianapolis, and I noticed Kiss was headlining in Indianapolis. And I flipped out and said, Jay, this time they're headlining.
Yeah.
You got to go. So he rounded up carloads of guys. We didn't have any cars ourselves.
The original Kiss Army.
The original Kiss Army. We took them from Terre Haute, $5 tickets, to the convention center. It was beautiful because it was like the first day of spring, and it was hotter than hell in this place. The ceiling was probably no higher than this, and we saw Status Quo blew the place apart. Rush came out before they were doing stuff, and this crazy guy, he goes, "You're going to have to stand because I want to stand. I want to be a part of this." And he says, "And we're going to stand by Simmons' side." And I'm like, "Oh crap!" So I'm not used to festival sitting. I mean, you go there, you're there, and that's where you're going to be the whole damn. You know, you're not going to the restroom or nothing. You're there. So he's over there, we're by Simmons, and of course we see a great show, and it was amazing that we could see the beginnings of Kiss Alive. We even thought Kiss Alive was recorded at our show. It wasn't, but we go back to school the next day and we go into our lockers, and I run to him. I go, "Can you hear?" and he laughs and says, "No."
He laughs and says, "Tuesday."
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm pretty scared because I mean, I shouldn't go coming back from a rock concert, you know, I can't hear.
And we're in school.
And then so Jay always called the request line in Terre Haute and said it was his deal, and he said, you know, he liked to pick up something obscure. I said, "I bet you can't play Hawkwind" or something like that.
Yeah.
And he would dare this stuff, and they would take it. Well, then eventually when we tried Kiss, we met a roadblock, didn't we?
Yes, we did. I used to call for Led Zeppelin, for Black Sabbath, for Deep Purple, and all the bands of the early 70s, and those were my guys. And then we saw these guys. And that became, for me, the turning point you were talking about, Craig, where I just couldn't believe what we had seen.
Yeah.
And
the addiction starts.
Yes, that's
The
really what
intensity.
it was. At that point, I thought, everybody's got to see this.
Yes.
And
so we went back, when we go back to high school, people would say, "Kiss my ass." Or the worst thing they would say is, "If they're so good, why aren't they on the radio?"
Right.
And we couldn't, and that's what kind of,
couldn't answer that question.
so that's what kind of started us to get them on the radio, because back in those days it was funny, you wore your band shirts like you did your sports teams.
Right.
Red Sox, Yankees, Aerosmith, Kiss, and that started our campaign. The Kiss Army, like some people say, was like Chinese water torture. It happened over a long period of time of constantly doing the crazy, stupid stuff.
It's interesting because your description of this uphill battle is very reflective, I think, of most Kiss fans, because as teenagers, Kiss fans did get teased. For some reason, they weren't the cool band. They were the band that you would get, that for some reason you get picked on for being a fan of. And people would, the cool kids would say, "That's not a cool band." And it's always been an uphill battle. So it's so interesting that in this microcosm of this world that you're living in Terre Haute, Indiana, that you guys are experiencing the same thing, starting what again becomes this legendary brand, but you're frustrated trying to get this station. How long are you calling the station to get Kiss to?
Every day.
And
we
for
were calling
for how long of a stretch are you calling?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I was habitually calling the radio station to hear whatever I wanted to hear anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say it just sort of evolved into me calling and just exclusively asking for Kiss, and them continuously saying, "We're not going to play Kiss."
Really? So that was the one band that you got pushback on, was Kiss?
Yeah, absolutely.
They just refused.
They would play Paranoid. They would play Smoke on the Water or whatever it was.
And then they would play games with us, as you guys would get a kick out of. They would play, like, you know, the instrumental Love theme from Kiss, and then they would play that.
That's right.
They would play that leading up to the news break, and we'd call and say, "Hey, we said to play Kiss," and they said, "We did play Kiss."
Yeah.
Or like I remember one other Jay's complaints was they played Strutter and didn't introduce the band. So they knew what they were doing to us. They were just poking us along. And to this day, the guys, they're still good friends of ours, and they'll tell me, they said, "Well, we knew they were going to be big. We thought you guys were silly, and we were just playing along with it." I didn't get that impression, because they told us one time that they were a mediocre Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Right.
And
I hated that.
And they said another time, they said, "Well, it's just another New York band like the Dolls. Who takes them seriously?" So I think the time we realized we had won was when they finally called me and said, "Can you bring your Kiss albums over to the station? We're going to make copies." And I said, "Because?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we got rid of our albums." I felt then that we had kind of won the battle, without any kind of anyone else going to jail, right?
Right.
Well, for anyone who wasn't
Not for that.
For anyone who wasn't there for the kickoff party yesterday, you guys described the moment that you made that turn to describe yourselves as something intimidating. And for those of the people that weren't there yesterday to hear the story, what was that moment? Because that tickled me.
Who called you, Bill? Who was that said the band wanted to talk to us?
I think it was the program director's wife, because we did something silly. We, besides just our calling radio stations, we coached younger kids to paint them up as Kiss, and we traipsed them through the mall of Terre Haute, and we would be 6 paces back, and we just sit back and laugh at the reaction. People were like, "Who are they? What is this all about?" Well, it was a rock group, but you would find out eventually. And
You guys are like drug dealers for Kiss.
and so
Getting all the young kids involved.
Push your
we
man.
called them the unknown soldiers of the Kiss Army, was a thing, because they were. And eventually Kiss took those guys, put them in a hearse, and when the band came to Terre Haute, they used them as a decoy. So the fans were following those guys when Kiss went in different things, and the people laugh about that bizarre, but that whole day, November 21st, 75, was such a crazy day. So when we took the Painted Soldiers up to WBTS, we knocked on the door just to screw with them. And I remember, I think Frank Baum was a jock thing. He said, "The Kiss Army has descended on us like a horde of painted devils." and Tricia was Rich's, the program director's wife. She jumped up and she says, "Kiss heard about what you guys were doing. The concert's a sellout." And at that time, the only concert sellout was Elvis. Aerosmith, Doobie Brothers, all these other bands that were getting airplay that Kiss could never sell out. Kiss comes and sells out with less than 6 months airplay, and she says, "Kiss wants to meet you," and I'm like, "I don't want to meet Kiss."
I don't know what to say to him at that point.
I just wanted them on the radio.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was as far as we
back
could
in those
afford to go.
days, they didn't do interviews. You didn't see them without their makeup. You didn't really think that they were the regular people you see today. Back then, there was this macabre, mysterious kind of thing they had going on that, I don't know, I didn't think, I wasn't about meeting them.
Yeah, they were a little scary, a little intimidating. But so are you saying the first reference to the Kiss Army was somebody from the station saying the Kiss Army has descended upon us?
As a horde of painted devils, yeah.
As a horde of painted devils.
Because we had the unknown soldiers with us.
And then you heard Kiss Army and
No. Back when he got that phone call, he said, "Jay," he was in the other room, and I said, "We're in his basement, okay?"
It was Wayne's World, guys.
Yeah.
we should sue Wayne's World. That's what we did.
So he said, "Jay, first of all, Kiss wants to meet us." And they said, "We want you to think of a name for your fan club, and we want you to make a banner." And so at that point, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, I thought, Kiss fan club, that's not what we are. In fact, Bill referenced the first Kiss t-shirts.
yeah,
We wore those to high school at the risk of getting picked on.
right, absolutely.
Yeah, they were made by a guy named Rob Smith as an art project with the first album on the front.
And we had our pictures taken in the bathroom a couple times.
Yeah,
And
that's
you
right.
can still find them online. I know Mike Brandvold, who does 3 sites, he joked with me yesterday about it. He says, "I still think that's one of the coolest things to see you guys dressed up with handmade Kiss shirts in a bathroom." And I said, "Well, I mean, what else were we going to do? We didn't have jobs or anything like that.
No.
We weren't going to the prom. I mean, so
Right.
we weren't. We didn't, did we? I mean."
Fine. So, thinking about what we were, people who would risk things, humiliation in high school wearing shirts, people who would run around and paint up, having, foot soldiers basically. We were more militant than, we were threatening the radio station, things like that on phone calls. Bill would write the Kiss Army letter of the day. And before we
terrible.
thought it was before we considered it the Army, and we were more like an army, I thought, than a fan club. because we had a mission. And so I thought, Kiss Army, tell them Kiss Army. And that's what we became.
And when you wrote the Kiss Army letter of the day,
Bill did that.
Who would
Yep.
that go out to?
Well, we were writing letters anyway. We were writing threatening letters, and we would cut up pictures from circus. No, stop laughing. We would cut up magazines at that time of Circus Magazine and Creed. And back those days, it was hard to get pictures from Rocknet. We would cut them out and paste them and say, we're going to burn your station down like Gene is blowing the fire if you don't start playing Kiss. Because then I would go way out and say, Kiss is better than the Beatles. You need to figure it out and move on. Well, eventually, when the band ticket sales were doing well, and they, I think it was September, right when they were going to come until November, the disc jockey, it was part of his, and he was brilliant, Rich Dickerson. He said, them dumb letters you guys wrote all summer, I want you to write them like 2 weeks leading up to the concert, and we'll call it the Kiss Army letter of the day. I'll read it at the 5 o'clock rush hour. And we would go back and forth, and we were doing Howard Stern before Howard Stern, because it was trash radio, you're the mom of this, and there was no FCC, and I would get really militant. And then the bad thing is, Rich always had the last word, so he would say, this proves it, or he would lie and say, well, I can tell Starkey did this because it's all in crayon. So this is the Kiss Army. You guys don't know anything. So he always had the last laugh. But I used to find out people later on in life, and they would say, aren't you the guy that did that? He goes, I used to remember driving home from work and listening to the Kiss Army letter of the day. Well, eventually when the band, the concert sold out, and at that time Kiss was still kind of new to sellouts, their management contacted the radio station. They say, okay, we know Elvis has been your only sellout. Aerosmith, Leonard Skinner, and everybody else didn't sell out. What were you doing differently for your Kiss promotions that you didn't do for the other bands? And he said, these two idiots are writing these letters. And they call themselves the Kiss Army. And Coin Management said, we need to hook up with these guys. And that's what happened.
We have two young jihadists that live here.
Yeah.
Terre Haute, Indiana.
Terre Haute, Indiana.
That are threatening everybody to play Kiss. What a dream that is for any new artist starting out, that there is such a dedicated base pushing you. So you get to that stage where the band wants to meet you. What is it like the first time you meet them?
Oh my God.
I think in some ways, and this isn't being inside, I think I was a little disappointed because when I first heard Gene talk, he sounded like a college professor. we expected, and then Paul was nothing like, how y'all doing? I mean, he was like, so it was kind of and I wouldn't say a letdown, but it was a different feeling. Now, Peter Chris, he sounded like he'd kick your butt.
Yeah.
And he came down there and said, yeah. And then Ace was Ace. But meeting him for the first time, because you never heard him talk, you can see why Gene never talked during the shows. He did these using growling. I mean, he was very prolific. I mean, he could talk about anything. So it took a while to get used to that stuff.
That must have been fascinating to see those four different personalities for the first time. And did you notice as the years go by, did their personalities change from how you originally met them to as their fame starts to grow? Do you notice a change in their personalities?
Well, Bill, you hung around with him, with Gene a lot more than my first experience was really my only experience for about 20 years. We were at a
Chinese bar.
We were invited to come along
To the
after
after
the
party.
show and hang out with them.
J.R. Smalling tells me, he goes, this is where the after party is. I want you to round up as many women as you can. And I'm like, I couldn't get a date to the prom, and you want me to go recruit groupies for Kiss. And my deal was, I just wanted him and my brother and everybody else to come with us. And JR said, I don't care if you have to go downtown Wabash Avenue. You get all these women, all this, and this is where you're going to meet Kiss. And I'm like, I couldn't do it. You didn't want to tell JR no, because he was an imposing dude anyway. And so we go to this Chinese restaurant to eat pizza.
Yeah, they had a room in the back, and there was pizza, and we were all sitting around a table, a fairly normal-sized dining table.
And
they were over there, and we were kind of like, I don't know what to say. What do we do?
I think the first stupid thing I said to Gene was, what's the second line to Deuce? I didn't know what to say. Get up and,
Well, I think he looked over and saw us and saw that we weren't going to get up from our chairs.
Right.
So he comes over, flips the chair around, and sits down, and I was speechless. I had no idea, and so yeah, the deuce thing was the best we could do. But I don't
was the
even
first
remember
meet and
what he
greet, I guess.
said, but he hung around with it. He was very generous with that.
All right, there's a very fascinating aspect about this that I want to know, which is the one thing they did that could never be done again is they were mystical creatures who were never photographed without their
Right.
makeup.
Mhm.
So when you first meet them, are they without their makeup?
Yes, they are, and we couldn't tell who was who.
That was my next question.
We tried with haircuts.
Yes.
We looked at haircuts and
But
said,
it didn't matter because their hair was ratted and
yeah,
jet black. It was all, they were all like this, and they were all super thin. I mean, like
Yeah.
that. The only thing you could tell was Peter, right?
right. Peter had the part down the middle, and that's what it looked like. And we kind of figured what Ace was the guy over at the pinball machine with the bottle of Jack.
Wow.
And so we probably figured that out. He was kind of in his own world that night.
Right.
And so it was kind of down to Gene and Paul and who they were. And that was when Gene came over and said, these guys aren't going to get up from the table.
And Paul was so cool. He came and he sat and talked with us. And I couldn't believe he was just so subdued, not like the people over here that, he wasn't doing anything like it. And he was talking to me about antiques.
Really?
Like, I guess his folks owned it. I mean, we were talking about antiques and just normal stuff. He had just bought a bed. And I mean, it was just amazing how down to earth they were. I mean, and then over at the bar, tell them who was over at the bar while we were.
Well, I didn't know, but Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee were over at the bar.
Yeah, they were with
And
us.
I couldn't believe it. Later when Bill said, yeah, those guys were there, I said, what?
So
Because I'm a Rush fan too, but
And is this the night that you're supposed to be involved in human trafficking to get the women
Yes.
at the?
That was the
Yeah, that's the same night, and of course I failed
they
that job.
Yeah.
And what had happened was, I don't know, only Terre Haute or Indiana people would understand. I think the disc jockeys from BTS grabbed some girls from St. Mary's of the Woods College, which was an all-girls Catholic school, and the girls were like huddled in the back, and they weren't even moving. And I remember like some of the band members making comments about the girls, but and I always say, hey, I flunked out as far as my groupie thing, I guess. So
Yeah.
You're terrible. Maybe it was because of me. One night Kiss didn't get laid or something. I don't know.
So back then, because again, this is such an amazing moment in pop music history. This band that you could never see without their makeup on. Do you remember being told specifically you cannot take pictures with them?
I didn't have
You
cameras.
just assumed it. I
You just
mean,
knew it. Yeah, you just knew.
Yeah.
And any
And-
pictures I had with them, unfortunately, was taken by their staff photographer, and you just understood that. And later on, like through '76, I was granted permission to go to the parties, and God bless John Hart was a great guy, and John he just Bill, I know you get up there, you won't do anything silly, and I could take me and my friends, and we would go up there and we were allowed to be in the party, and there's Gene, Paul, P. I mean, and you just assumed you weren't gonna do that. I remember one time that I was up there in '76, and Gene was with us, and Gene left, and I opened up the paper the next day, and he had left us because Karen Carpenter was there, and he wanted to meet Karen Carpenter, so he left our party to go meet her at the same time. It was in the indie paper. He goes, I wonder where Gene went. He wasn't at our party very long. He was doing that. So,
Was it- And did these guys? Do you remember anybody at the time trying to get pictures of them in these private moments?
no.
No.
I mean, it was like if you got to see Kiss without their makeup off, you respected that. I mean, that was the cool part of it, and everybody that went with me. I ran into a guy not too long ago, and his little brother was with us, and he said that was the coolest thing we ever did was go up to the governor's suite, and he got to see Kiss without their makeup on. I said, yeah. And I remember later on in the evening, we sat in like a round situation, a chair, and listened to Peter and Lydia talk about home and Peter's love of music and all that, and that was just wonderful. To this day, I'm still grateful that Lydia was just so nice to us, because we were just kids. We were granted access to the party like that. And
Yeah, that is such a crazy thing because the longer they go with the makeup on, the bigger the curiosity becomes of what do those guys look like without their makeup on? Which is why when they finally did it, it was such a big pop culture moment, MTV and the whole thing. By the way, I'm assuming you guys are okay with taking questions from
Oh, yeah,
people in the
that's-
audience.
that's what we're here.
Is there a microphone in the